The hand came from behind, thick fingers tangling in Charlotte Bennett's auburn hair with practiced cruelty. The force yanked her head back, exposing her throat, making her students gasp. But in that split second, something shifted in her hazel eyes, something the three boys surrounding her desk had never seen in their victims before. Not fear, not pain, something far more dangerous. "Big mistake," Charlotte whispered, her voice carrying the weight of 1,000 untold battles. What happened next would become legend at Jefferson High School, whispered in hallways and shared in hushed tones for years to come. But to understand why a 28-year-old English teacher could dismantle 3 athletic seniors in under 30 seconds, you need to know what brought her to this moment. 3 weeks earlier, Charlotte Bennett had walked through Jefferson High's main entrance for the first time. The hallway stretched before her like a gauntlet, flickering fluorescent lights, casting shadows over graffitied lockers. The smell of teenage desperation mixing with industrial disinfectant. Students parted as she passed, their eyes tracking the new teacher with predatory interest. "Fresh meat," someone whispered. "How long you think she'll last?" another voice responded. Charlotte heard every word. She'd trained herself to catch whispers, to read body language, to spot danger before it spotted her. These skills hadn't come from any teaching certification program. She paused at her assigned classroom door, room 217, and took a steadying breath. Behind her eyes flashed an image she couldn't shake: her brother's casket, closed because the damage had been too severe for viewing. 17 years old, 3 years younger than the students she was about to face. "Miss Bennett," a small voice interrupted her thoughts. Charlotte turned to find a girl with dark curls and nervous eyes clutching textbooks against her chest like armor. Everything about her screamed target, the way she hunched her shoulders, how she kept her back to the wall, the fading bruise on her upper arm that her cardigan couldn't quite hide. "Yes. I'm Isabella Chen. I'm in your 3rd period class. I just wanted to say welcome." Before Charlotte could respond, a shadow fell over them both. Marcus Reed stood 6'3", 200 pounds of cultivated menace wrapped in a Letterman jacket. His blonde hair was styled with expensive product, his smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Izzy, Izzy, Izzy," Marcus crooned, reaching out to flick one of Isabella's curls. The girl flinched. "Making friends with the new teacher? How sweet." 2 more boys flanked him: Ethan Torres, dark-haired and conflicted, whose eyes darted between Marcus and the floor, and Derek Palmer, all muscle and no mercy, cracking his knuckles like punctuation. Charlotte stepped between Marcus and Isabella with fluid precision. "You must be Marcus Reed. I've heard about you." Marcus's smile widened. "All good things, I hope. Your reputation precedes you." Charlotte's tone remained neutral, professional. "Star quarterback, honor roll, student council." She paused, letting her eyes travel from his designer shoes to his perfectly styled hair. "Suspended twice for fighting. 3 complaints of harassment, all mysteriously dropped. Father on the school board." The hallway seemed to hold its breath. Marcus's smile faltered for just a moment before returning full force. "Someone's been doing their homework." "I always do." Charlotte turned to Isabella. "Thank you for the welcome. Isabella, I'll see you in class." As Isabella scurried away, Marcus leaned in close enough that Charlotte could smell his cologne, something expensive trying to mask something rotten. "You don't know how things work here yet, Miss Bennett, but you'll learn." Charlotte met his gaze without flinching. "I'm a quick study." That first class set the pattern. Charlotte stood at the front of the room, introducing herself to 32 juniors who ranged from eager to openly hostile. Marcus held court in the back row, feet up on his desk, making subtle gestures that had half the class snickering at inappropriate moments. "We'll be starting with a unit on power in literature," Charlotte announced, writing on the whiteboard with deliberate strokes. "How authors explore who has it, who wants it, and what people will do to keep it." "Sounds boring," Marcus called out. Not bothering to raise his hand, Charlotte turned, marker still in hand. "Really, I find power dynamics fascinating. Take this classroom, for instance." She gestured to the seating arrangement. "Notice how certain students automatically claimed the back rows. The corners. Psychology tells us these are positions of perceived power ability to observe without being observed. Quick exit access, backs protected." The snickering stopped. Several students shifted uncomfortably. "But real power," Charlotte continued, turning back to the board, "isn't about position. It's about choice. The choice to build up or tear down, to protect or prey upon, to evolve or remain stuck in patterns that no longer serve us." She wrote 3 words: power, choice, consequence. Everything we read this year will explore these themes, starting with Lord of the Flies. Marcus's feet hit the floor with a thud. "Great, a book about kids being mean to each other. How original." "Actually, it's about what happens when external authority disappears and people reveal their true natures." Charlotte's gaze found Marcus with laser precision. Some rise to the occasion, others descend into savagery. "The question is, which would you be?" The challenge hung in the air. Marcus's jaw tightened, his hands forming fists on his desk. Ethan touched his arm. A warning, but Marcus shook him off. "Careful, Miss Bennett," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a growl. "You don't know who runs this school." Charlotte smiled, not the warm smile she'd given Isabella, but something harder. Forged in fires Marcus couldn't imagine. "No, Mr. Reed, you don't know who just walked into it." The bell rang, shattering the tension. Students filed out quickly, sensing the electricity in the air. Isabella lingered, approaching Charlotte's desk with something like awe in her eyes. "No one's ever stood up to him like that," she whispered. Charlotte looked at the girl's bruised arm, then back to her face. "Someone should have, long ago." That night, Charlotte sat in her sparse apartment, a cup of tea cooling on the table beside her. The walls were mostly bare, except for 2 things: a display case holding several mixed martial arts championship belts and medals, and a photograph of a boy who looked like a younger, softer version of Charlotte herself. She picked up the photo, tracing her brother Jamie's face with 1 finger. He'd been 15 in this picture, grinning after she'd taught him his first arm bar. "You're getting scary good at this." "Char." He'd laughed. "Promise you'll only use your powers for good." "Promise," she'd replied, ruffling his hair. "These skills are for protection, not pain." 2 years later, he was gone. Not from a physical fight, Jamie had gotten good enough to defend himself against direct attacks. But there were other kinds of violence, other ways to break a person: sustained psychological torture, social isolation, the constant, grinding pressure of being everyone's favorite target until you couldn't see any way out except. Charlotte set the photo down and opened her laptop, pulling up the files she'd requested on Jefferson High's students. Marcus Reed's record was thick with disciplinary actions that never quite stuck. Son of school board president David Reed and county judge Patricia Reed, star athlete with scholarship prospects. 3 previous teachers had filed complaints, all withdrawn within days. But it was the other files that made Charlotte's blood run cold. Isabella Chen, 7, documented visits to the nurse's office this year alone. Ethan Torres, former honor student, whose grades had plummeted after joining Marcus's circle. Derek Palmer, expelled from 2 previous schools for violence. And then there were the others, a dozen names with similar patterns. Declining grades, increased absences, behavioral changes, transfer requests. 2 students who'd left the district entirely. 1 who'd attempted. Charlotte closed the laptop, her jaw set with determination. She'd become a teacher for this moment, for these kids. She'd trained for years, not just in education, but in understanding predators and their prey. Tomorrow, she'd begin the real work. The next morning brought rain, turning the school parking lot into a maze of puddles that reflected the gray sky. Charlotte arrived early, using the quiet time to prepare her classroom. She was arranging desks when she heard voices in the hallway low, threatening, punctuated by a softer voice pleading. She moved to the door, peering out to see Marcus pinning a freshman against the lockers, one massive hand pressed against the boy's chest. Ethan stood watch while Derek rifled through the kid's backpack, pulling out a wallet. "Please," the freshman whimpered. "That's my lunch money for the week." "Consider it a tax," Marcus said, pressing harder, "for the privilege of walking our hallways." Charlotte stepped into the hallway. "Gentlemen." All 4 heads snapped toward her. The freshman used the distraction to squirm free, grabbing his backpack and running. Derek still held the wallet. "Give it back," Charlotte said simply. Derek looked to Marcus, who nodded. The wallet hit the floor with a slap. "Just having a conversation with our new friend," Marcus said, his tone casual, but his eyes hard. "No harm done." "No," Charlotte agreed. "Not yet." She walked past them into her classroom, feeling their stares burning into her back. She'd just painted a bigger target on herself. But that was fine. Better her than kids who couldn't defend themselves. The day progressed with mounting tension. In class, Marcus's disruptions grew bolder, paper airplanes when Charlotte's back was turned, whispered comments that made other students laugh nervously, constant challenges to her authority. But Charlotte handled each provocation with calm precision, turning his attacks into teaching moments. When he threw a paper airplane, she caught it without looking and unfolded it at her desk. "Interesting. Mr. Reed has provided us with an example of how power can be expressed through juvenile actions when someone feels threatened. Thank you for the demonstration." Marcus. When he made crude jokes, she responded with academic analysis. Notice how humor is often used as a weapon to establish dominance. In Shakespeare's plays, we call these characters fools, though rarely are they actually foolish. They're usually compensating for something. Each deflection made Marcus angrier, his face reddening, his jokes becoming meaner. Ethan kept shooting him worried looks, while Derek just grinned, enjoying the show. It was Isabella who provided the spark that would ignite the powder keg. During a discussion about symbolism in literature, Charlotte asked for examples of how objects could represent larger concepts. Isabella, emboldened by Charlotte's presence, raised her hand for the first time all year. "Yes, Isabella. In The Great Gatsby, the green light represents impossible dreams," Isabella offered, her voice gaining strength. "Things we reach for but can never quite grasp." "Excellent example. Like Izzy, thinking she'll ever be normal." Marcus interrupted, his voice carrying across the room. "Some dreams are impossible for a reason. The cruelty of it, the casual way he wielded words like weapons, made something snap in Charlotte's carefully maintained composure. She turned to face Marcus fully, her expression carved from stone. "You're right, Mr. Reed. Some dreams are impossible, like thinking you can coast through life on your father's name and your ability to intimidate others. Like believing that making others feel small makes you bigger. Like imagining that this behavior will serve you anywhere outside these walls. The classroom went silent. Marcus stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor, at 6'3". He towered over Charlotte's 5'6" frame, but she didn't step back. "You need to be careful," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Is that a threat?" "Mr. Reed, it's a promise, after school, your classroom. We need to have a private discussion about your teaching methods." "I'll be here," Charlotte replied. "I'm always happy to provide extra lessons to students who need them." Marcus stormed out, Derek and Ethan trailing behind him. The remaining students sat frozen until the bell rang, then fled as if escaping a war zone. Only Isabella remained. "You shouldn't have done that," Isabella said, her earlier courage evaporating. "You don't understand what he's capable of." Charlotte looked at the girl's frightened face and made a decision. "Isabella, I need you to do something for me after school. I want you to go straight home. Don't stay for any clubs. Don't linger in the parking lot. Just go home." "What about you?" "I'll be fine. I've handled bullies before." Isabella looked unconvinced but nodded. As she left, Charlotte noticed her pull out her phone, typing rapidly. Good. Maybe the girl was smarter than she seemed. The rest of the day crawled by. Charlotte taught her remaining classes on autopilot. Her mind already in the coming confrontation. She'd known this moment would arrive, had planned for it, trained for it. But knowing and experiencing were different things. At 3:15, the final bell rang. Charlotte stood in her empty classroom, arranging papers on her desk with methodical precision. She'd changed into flat shoes and pulled her hair back in a tight bun. Small preparations that most wouldn't notice, but that could make all the difference. 3:20. The hallways grew quiet as students dispersed. 3:25. Footsteps in the corridor, multiple sets. Heavy and purposeful. 3:30. The door opened. Marcus entered first, his swagger intact but something darker in his eyes. Derek followed, closing the door with a soft click that sounded like a trap springing shut. But it was Ethan who surprised Charlotte, the conflict written across his face, the way he hung back as if trying to distance himself from what was about to happen. "Gentlemen," Charlotte said, not looking up from her papers. "How can I help you?" "You can start by apologizing," Marcus said, moving closer. "In front of the whole class tomorrow. Tell them you were wrong about me." "I don't lie to my students." Derek laughed an ugly sound. "You really don't get it, do you? This isn't your prep school or wherever you came from. This is our territory." Charlotte finally looked up, taking in their positions. Marcus directly in front of her desk. Derek circling to her left. Ethan still by the door. Classic intimidation formation. They'd done this before. "Actually, I taught in inner-city Chicago before this," she said conversationally. "Jefferson High is practically suburban by comparison." "Then you should know better." Marcus snarled. He slammed his palms on her desk, leaning over it. "Last chance. Apologize, or things get unpleasant." Charlotte stood slowly, maintaining eye contact. "Mr. Reed, you're making a mistake." "No," Marcus said, starting to circle around the desk. "You made the mistake. Coming here. Thinking you could change things. Thinking you're some kind of hero teacher who's going to save everyone." He was behind her now. Charlotte tracked his movement by sound. The heavy footfalls. The creak of the floor. Derek had moved closer on her left. Ethan remained by the door, his face pale. "I especially love that bit about power," Marcus continued, his voice dripping contempt. "Let me show you what real power looks like." That's when it happened. His hand shot out, fingers tangling in Charlotte's hair, yanking her head back with vicious force. The pain was sharp, immediate, triggering something primal that Charlotte had kept carefully locked away. Time slowed. Her brother's voice echoed in her memory. "Char, why do you train so hard? It's not like you're going to become some cage fighter." Her own response, "Because someday, someone might need me to be strong enough to protect them, and I want to be ready." Marcus's fingers tightened in her hair, pulling harder. "Not so tough now. Are you?" Charlotte's hands moved without conscious thought. Muscle memory took over 5 years of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, 3 years of Muay Thai, 2 years of Krav Maga, countless hours preparing for exactly this moment. Her right hand shot up, gripping Marcus's wrist while her body pivoted. Her left elbow drove back into his solar plexus with surgical precision. As he gasped, she bent forward, using his own grip against him, flipping him over her shoulder in a move that would have scored perfect marks in any dojo. Marcus hit the floor hard, the impact driving all remaining air from his lungs. But Charlotte didn't release his arm. Instead, she dropped to one knee, transitioning smoothly into an armbar that had him screaming before Derek could even process what had happened. "Don't!" Charlotte commanded as Derek charged, but he didn't listen. Derek came at her with a wild haymaker that telegraphed his intentions from a mile away. Charlotte released Marcus, rolled backward, and came up in a fighter's crouch. Derek's punch met empty air. Her counter, a perfect cross to his jaw, sent him spinning into a desk. 2 down. But there should have been 3. Charlotte turned to find Ethan still by the door, his hand on the handle, but making no move to either attack or flee. Their eyes met, and in his, she saw something she recognized: a boy who'd been swept along by currents stronger than himself, drowning in choices he'd never wanted to make. "Go!" she told him. "Now!" Ethan yanked the door open and ran. Charlotte turned back to Marcus and Derek. Marcus was cradling his arm, his face a mask of pain and shock. Derek was using a desk to pull himself upright, blood trickling from his split lip. "Lesson's over," Charlotte said, barely breathing hard. "Get out!" They stumbled toward the door, Derek supporting Marcus, who kept looking back at Charlotte as if seeing her for the first time. "This isn't over," Marcus managed to gasp. Charlotte sat on the edge of her desk, finally allowing herself to feel the sting where he'd pulled her hair. "No," she agreed. "It's just beginning." As their footsteps faded down the hallway, Charlotte noticed something blinking in the corner, a red light from the bookshelf. She walked over and found a phone propped between 2 novels, still recording. Isabella. Smart girl. Charlotte picked up the phone, looking at the timestamp. 22 minutes of footage. More than enough to change everything. But as she stood in her empty classroom, hair disheveled, knuckles slightly reddened, Charlotte knew the real fight hadn't even started. Physical confrontations were simple action and reaction. Training, overcoming aggression. The harder battle would be what came next, changing hearts. Healing damage, breaking cycles that had persisted for years. She thought of Jamie, of all the fights she'd won that hadn't been enough to save him. But maybe, just maybe, she could save some other big sister's little brother, some other family from that particular grief. Charlotte downloaded the video to her own phone, then set Isabella's on her desk with a note. "Thank you. Come see me tomorrow. We have work to do." The rain had stopped, leaving the world outside her window washed clean and gleaming with possibility. Somewhere in this school were dozens of Isabellas, trapped in cycles of fear. Somewhere were potential Marcuses who could still choose a different path. And somewhere, she hoped, were enough Ethan's kids who just needed permission to step away from the darkness. Charlotte Bennett had come to Jefferson High to teach English. But first, she was going to teach a much more important lesson, that strength wasn't about the power to hurt, but the power to heal. That real courage meant standing up not just for yourself, but for those who couldn't stand alone. The hair grab had been Marcus's biggest mistake, because in that moment of violation, he'd awakened something that had been waiting, preparing, hoping for the chance to make a difference. Class was now in session. The video went viral before sunrise. Charlotte woke to 37 missed calls, her phone buzzing like an angry hornet against her nightstand. The first text was from Principal Sullivan. "My office, 7 a.m. Come prepared to explain." She arrived at 6:45, finding the parking lot already crowded with news vans. Someone had leaked the footage overnight, 22 minutes of crystal-clear evidence showing Marcus Reed assaulting a teacher and getting a lesson in consequences he'd never forget. "Ms. Bennett," a reporter rushed forward, microphone extended. "Is it true you're a former MMA champion?" Charlotte walked past without responding, but inside her chest, her heart hammered against her ribs. This wasn't how she'd wanted things to unfold. Principal Sullivan's office felt like a pressure cooker. The 60-year-old administrator sat behind his desk, face flushed, blood pressure medication visible beside his coffee cup. Around the room stood the school board president, David Reed Marcus's father, along with 3 other board members and the district superintendent. "Sit," Sullivan commanded. Charlotte remained standing. "I'll need my union representative present for any disciplinary meeting." "This isn't disciplinary," David Reed snarled. He was Marcus in 30 years, same entitled bearing, same barely controlled rage. "This is criminal. You assaulted my son. Your son assaulted me first. I defended myself with minimum necessary force." "Minimum force?" Reed's voice climbed. "His arm is sprained. He might miss the rest of football season." "He's lucky that's all I sprained." Charlotte's calm seemed to infuriate him more. "Mr. Reed, your son grabbed me by the hair from behind. That's assault. His friend attempted to punch me. That's attempted battery. I used exactly the force needed to end the threat. Nothing more." "You're a trained fighter," one of the board members interjected. "You should have—" "What let them hurt me?" Called for help that wouldn't come. Charlotte turned to Sullivan. "How many complaints have been filed about Marcus Reed in the last 3 years?" Sullivan's silence spoke volumes. "I'll tell you," Charlotte continued. 17 formal complaints, 3 teachers requesting transfers, 2 families who moved their children to different schools, and 1 student, Jamie Chen, Isabella's brother, who attempted suicide last year after months of harassment. The room went still. "You don't know what you're talking about," David Reed said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "I do my homework. Remember—" Charlotte pulled out a folder. Every incident, every complaint, every time someone in this room made it go away. She placed the folder on Sullivan's desk. "So before you threaten me with criminal charges, ask yourself how it will look when this pattern becomes public. Because I promise you, it will." The door burst open. Ethan Torres stood there, breathing hard, his mother beside him. "I need to tell the truth," Ethan said. "Ethan, don't," David Reed started. "No," Ethan's voice cracked. "I'm done being quiet. I saw everything. Marcus planned it. He said we were going to teach her a lesson. I have the group texts to prove it. He held up his phone, scrolling through messages that made the board members shift uncomfortably. Plans to corner Charlotte, discussions about putting her in her place, even jokes about what they'd do if she fought back. I also have this, Ethan continued, pulling up another video. From 2 months ago. The shaky footage showed Marcus and Derek holding a younger student's head in a toilet while he thrashed desperately. The boy's strangled cries were audible even through the poor audio quality. "That's my nephew," Mrs. Torres said quietly. "He didn't want to report it. Said it would only make things worse. He was right, wasn't he?" Charlotte watched David Reed's face crumble as he recognized the truth he'd been avoiding. His son wasn't a mischievous kid making mistakes. He was a predator. "I think we need to discuss this privately," Superintendent Walsh said finally. "Miss Bennett, please wait outside." Charlotte left the office to find the hallway packed with students. Isabella stood at the front, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," Isabella sobbed. "I should have asked before recording. You saved me." Charlotte interrupted, pulling the girl into a hug. "And probably saved a lot of other people, too." More students pressed forward, sharing their own stories, years of terror, silence, and adults who looked the other way. Charlotte listened to each one, her resolve hardening. This was bigger than Marcus Reed. This was about a system that had failed its most vulnerable. An hour later, Sullivan emerged from his office looking older than his years. "Miss Bennett, please come back in." The atmosphere had shifted. David Reed was gone. The remaining board members looked shaken. "We've reviewed the evidence," Sullivan began. "You acted in self-defense. No disciplinary action will be taken." He paused, seeming to age before her eyes. "I also want to apologize. We failed you. More importantly, we failed our students." "What happens now?" Charlotte asked. "Marcus Reed will be expelled. Derek Palmer as well. Criminal charges may be filed. That's up to you and the district attorney." Walsh leaned forward. "We're also implementing immediate changes. Mandatory reporting training for all staff, anonymous tip systems, and we'd like you to lead our new anti-bullying task force." Charlotte considered this. On one condition, counseling instead of just punishment for Marcus and Derek. They're 18, technically adults, but they're still kids who can change. Prison won't fix what's broken in them. Sullivan's eyebrows rose. "After what they did to you, especially after what they did to me." Charlotte's voice carried the weight of hard-won wisdom. "Hurt people hurt people. We can perpetuate the cycle or try to break it." Over the following weeks, Jefferson High transformed. The video had indeed gone viral, sparking national conversations about bullying, self-defense, and institutional failure. Charlotte found herself at the center of a media storm she'd never wanted, turning down interview requests and book deals. But in her classroom, the real work continued. Marcus Reed sat in the front row now, court-ordered to attend Charlotte's class as part of his plea deal. The arrogance had drained from him like air from a punctured balloon. In its place was something raw and uncertain, a boy seeing himself clearly for the first time. "Today we're discussing redemption in literature," Charlotte announced, writing the word on the board. "The idea that people can change, evolve, become better versions of themselves. Can anyone give me an example?" Surprisingly, Marcus raised his hand. "Jean Valjean in Les Miserables. Good example. What makes his redemption believable?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably. He faces what he did, doesn't make excuses, and he spends the rest of his life trying to balance the scales. Exactly. Charlotte met his eyes. Redemption isn't a moment. It's a lifetime commitment to being better than you were. After class, Marcus lingered. Ms. Bennett, I've been seeing the counselor you recommended. She says I have a lot of work to do. We all do. My dad, he cried when he watched the video, said he saw himself in me and hated it. Marcus's voice broke. I became him without even realizing it. The fact that you realize it now means you can choose differently, Charlotte said gently. Your father's patterns don't have to be yours. Ethan appeared in the doorway. Since the incident, he'd become one of Charlotte's most dedicated students, using his influence to protect rather than prey upon others. Marcus, you coming? The anti-bullying meeting starts in 5. Marcus nodded, then turned back to Charlotte. That kid in the video, Tommy Morrison, I apologized to him yesterday. His mom cried, said she'd been praying for this day. He swallowed hard. I made a mother cry from relief that her son might be safe. How messed up is that? What matters is that you're facing it, Charlotte said. That takes real courage. As the boys left for the student-led anti-bullying meeting, something that would have been unthinkable months ago, Isabella appeared with a stack of papers. Permission slips for the Self-Defense Club, she announced proudly. We have 43 signatures. Charlotte smiled, remembering the scared girl who could barely make eye contact that first day. Isabella now walked with her shoulders back, met people's eyes, spoke with confidence. She'd started a support group for bullying victims that met twice weekly. How's your brother? Charlotte asked. Isabella's face softened. Better. He's been coming to the meetings. Says if his little sister can be brave, so can he. That afternoon, Charlotte stood in the gymnasium watching her first self-defense class. Students of all sizes and backgrounds paired up, practicing basic defensive moves. She'd been careful to emphasize that these skills were for protection only, teaching them the philosophy alongside the physical techniques. Remember, she called out, the best fight is the one you avoid. But if you can't avoid it, you survive it and get to safety. We're not creating fighters, we're creating survivors. Principal Sullivan appeared beside her, looking healthier than he had in months. You know, enrollment applications are up 30% for next year. Parents want their kids in the school with the teacher who fights for students. Charlotte winced. I'd rather be known as the teacher who teaches. You do both. Sullivan watched the students practicing. I've been in education for 30 years. I've seen initiatives come and go, but this feels different, sustainable. It's not about me, Charlotte insisted. It's about them choosing to be better, as if to prove her point. Marcus and Derek entered the gym. They'd been banned from official sports, but had asked to join the self-defense class. Charlotte had agreed, with conditions. You two are demonstrating today, she announced. Show everyone the hair-grab defense. Marcus paled slightly, but moved to the center of the mat. Derek followed, with careful precision. They demonstrated the technique Charlotte had used, how to break the grip. Create distance. Escape safely. The person grabbing is using intimidation and pain to control, Charlotte explained as they moved through the positions. But hair is just hair. It hurts, but it won't kill you. Stay calm, use their grip against them, and get free. After class, Charlotte found herself alone in the gym, running through her own forms. The familiar movements centered her, reminding her of hours spent training with Jamie, preparing for dangers they'd thought would come from outside their school walls. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number with a video attachment. She opened it to find a recording from another school 2 states away. A larger student cornering a smaller one, raising his fist, then stopping. "No," he said clearly. "I saw what happened to that football player who grabbed his teacher. I'm not ruining my life over this." The video ended with both students walking away unharmed. Charlotte smiled, then noticed another message, this one from Marcus. "Helped a freshman today who was being hassled. Felt weird being on the other side. Good weird. Thank you for not giving up on me when everyone else was ready to." As she left school that evening, Charlotte passed the memorial garden students had created for those lost to bullying, including Jamie Chen, whose sister Isabella now tended the flowers with fierce devotion. "He would have loved you," Isabella said, appearing beside her. Jamie always said he wished teachers understood what it was really like. "Tell me about him," Charlotte said softly. They sat on the bench as Isabella painted a picture of a boy who loved music and mathematics, who'd tried to stand up for others until he became the target himself. A boy whose light had been systematically extinguished by the very people now working to ensure it never happened again. "I used to hate them," Isabella admitted. "Marcus, Derek, all of them. But watching them change, it's like Jamie's death might actually mean something now." Charlotte thought of her own brother, of the promise she'd made at his graveside to use her strength to protect others. She'd imagined hunting down his tormentors, making them pay. Instead, she'd found something more powerful, the ability to transform pain into purpose, violence into redemption. 6 months after the hair grab, that had changed everything. Charlotte stood before a packed auditorium. She'd been invited to speak at the state education conference about Jefferson High's transformation. The boy who'd introduced her, Marcus Reed, now heading to community college with plans to become a counselor. "People ask me how I forgave her for humiliating me," Marcus said into the microphone, his voice steady despite the crowd. "But Ms. Bennett didn't humiliate me. She revealed me. And yeah, that hurt, but it was the kind of hurt that comes with healing, like when they reset a broken bone so it can mend properly." He looked back at Charlotte. She could have destroyed me that day. She had the skill, the justification, and honestly, I deserved it. Instead, she showed me mercy I hadn't earned and gave me a chance I didn't deserve. That's the kind of strength that actually changes the world. When Charlotte took the stage, she didn't talk about martial arts or self-defense techniques. Instead, she spoke about Jamie, her brother, whose death had sent her on this path, about Isabella and her brother, both still healing but no longer hiding, about Ethan, who'd found the courage to step away from darkness, about Marcus and Derek, who proved that even bullies could choose redemption. "Every school has its Marcus Reeds," she said, looking out at hundreds of educators. "Kids who've learned that power means dominance, that strength requires victims, and every school has its Isabella's students whose light is being systematically dimmed by fear." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "But here's what I learned: every school also has teachers willing to stand in the gap, administrators ready to choose justice over convenience, students brave enough to speak truth to power. We just have to give them permission to be the heroes they already are." The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes, but Charlotte barely heard it. She was thinking about Monday's lesson plan, about the new students who would need guidance, about the endless work of building a world where no child had to choose between standing up and staying safe. As she left the stage, her phone buzzed with a message from Isabella. "Graduating next month. got into state university, major education. Someone's got to carry on the tradition. Right. Charlotte smiled, touching the spot where Marcus had grabbed her hair all those months ago. That moment of violence had become a catalyst for transformation she never could have imagined. Sometimes the strongest thing you could do wasn't fighting back. It was showing others they were worth fighting for. The war against bullying would never truly end. There would always be new Marcus Reeds, new Isabella Chens, new battles to fight. But now Jefferson High had something more powerful than any martial arts technique, a community committed to protecting its most vulnerable, redeeming its most lost, and proving that change was possible, one choice at a time. Charlotte Bennett had come to Jefferson High to teach English. Instead, she'd taught the most important lesson of all, that true strength lay not in the power to hurt, but in the courage to heal. And sometimes, all it took to change everything was one teacher willing to let her hair down and then pick herself back up, stronger than before. The grab had been meant to break her. Instead, it had broken open a system that had trapped them all, and from those broken pieces, they were building something better, one rescued soul at a time. Class dismissed. But the education, the real education, had just begun. As Charlotte walked to her car, she found a package on the windshield. Inside, a simple note from all the kids who needed someone like you. JC. Beneath it, a framed photo of her brother Jamie at 15, the one from her apartment. But this wasn't her copy. On the back, in faded ink, for my English teacher, you asked us to bring something that inspires us. This is my hero, my sister. She doesn't know I borrowed this to scan. She thinks she failed me, but she's the reason I made it, as long as I did. Jamie Bennett. Charlotte clutched the photo to her chest, tears finally coming. Jamie had been in someone's class, reaching out, trying to signal his pain. Now she understood. She wasn't just teaching for the Isabellas and reforming the Marcuses. She was teaching for all the Jamies, the ones still here and the ones who weren't. Every saved kid was a promise kept. Every transformed bully was a cycle broken. Every day she showed up was a victory against the darkness that had taken her brother. She looked back at Jefferson High, where lights still burned in windows and students still worked to build something better. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles, new chances to make a difference. But tonight, she would go home and tell Jamie's photo about all the lives he was still saving. All the kids who would make it because his sister had learned to transform grief into grace, pain into purpose, and a single moment of violence into a movement of hope. The hair grab had started everything. But love, fierce, protective, transformative love,